Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to our special debate coverage. All four of us are here at the desk with the Counterpoints family, so we're very, very glad to see you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
It's always more fun when everybody's
it is more fun. We experienced...
Much as I love you, Saagar.
Yeah, no.
The solo energy.
I totally understand. It's just last time around, we all experienced a very special moment together.
We did.
It's like the last time we were together was DNC,
Magic happened last time.
I've almost forgotten about that one because the true magic happened last night. And I keep thinking, I'm like, man, can we recreate the energy and the excitement of that one? Probably not possible, unfortunately, just given historical circumstances. But we did all certainly live through stuff together. Before we get started,
we definitively proved debates sometimes really do matter. They can matter a lot.
I got a nice egg on the face. It's very good for my ego to be humbled. Just a reminder to everybody before we get started, we'll be taking questions from our premium subscribers, which will be on Locals, which is a separate stream. So premium subscribers, you guys can, when we call for questions, just go ahead and ask them in the chat, and we will take them as they come. A lot like we
model or anything like that. But if you just take in the raw average of everything where they are right now, is Kamala Harris with a 1.1 spread. That is, if that was actually the result, that would be unlikely to deliver the win for her because Republicans have maybe somewhere around a 3-point advantage vis-a-vis the Electoral College. But moving the specifics of this aside, I mean, the bottom line is it's effectively a 50-50 country. The race looks like a jump ball. She had a ton of momentum when Biden is out and she comes in. She goes through this honeymoon period. She picks Tim Walz. He does a great job. They go into the convention. And now things have sort of plateaued. So for Kamala, it's a huge night. We just had that New York Times poll that was not good for her. Yeah. And one of the things that it said really clearly is people want to know more about who this lady is and what she wants to do as president, which I think is an entirely reasonable thing for people to expect. Trump, on the other hand, obviously he's been in the public eye for years and years and years and years and years, even before he was a presidential candidate. Views on him are pretty hardened, but I think it's mostly downside risk for him because as of late, his favorability rating has actually been comparatively higher for him, given his, where he's historically been. So are some of the people who previously liked him and now are okay with him, are they reminded of some of the things that they, really disliked about him and were really uncomfortable with? That's the risk for him. The mics are going to be muted. I think that helps him to be able to just sort of, maintain, which is all he needs to do tonight. And I think for Kamala Harris, the big to-do list is just to come across as sort of confident and capable and exceed the expectations that have been set for her as being a candidate who is kind of cautious and nervous in these extemporaneous settings.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting moment for her because I think she could lose the election tonight, but it's very hard to see her winning. Like if she came out and with this being her first real presentation in front, like live presentation in front of a national audience where she's not, reading off a teleprompter or speaking at a rally, if she completely face planted, you could see that being very difficult to overcome, except for the fact that she's still running against Trump. So anybody's always in it until the very end, except maybe Biden wasn't. But she could put it this way: she could put herself down in like the 5% likelihood of winning with a complete disastrous performance tonight. It's hard to see her delivering the type of performance that says, okay, she's definitely winning, because she's kind of so new, and there's so many people who are like, I need to hear more. And I think a debate where she actually laid a bunch out about herself would get people some of the way there, but it's not a platform where you can really persuade people of that, because it's going to be talking points. You're not going deep enough.
So yeah, picking up on that, I've been thinking a lot about this just in terms of the no interviews or the very few interviews going into this. And I mean, we said it many times, and it's not just a partisan hit. I really think it was a tremendous mistake because it really does increase the risk going into this. Now, the rules.
It depends on how she was going to do in those interviews.
That's a fair point, right? Yeah,
if they didn't go well, they're going to be like, why'd you
That is a great point. So that's one of those where, but if that's the truth, then this lady's never going to get elected anyway. So I guess the point comes down to
California.
It comes down to this. It's I think the rules are generally beneficial actually to both candidates. I really do. So the muted microphones are going to keep Trump relatively on message. He will not be able to interrupt, but quite literally not able to recreate his very worst debate performance, which we'll show everybody in a little bit. So on net, I think, if you keep yourself from your worst demons, that's probably a benefit. For Kamala, I think it's a major strength because she's such a scripted politician that, as we all know, no debate is ever one where people answer the questions, ever. The golden rule in politics is always like you answer the question that you want to answer, not the one that is actually asked. Every question will resolve itself to talking points, to pre-prepared statements. She's holed up for almost 8-9 days now for the last, like with a huge team. They recreated the stage. They had somebody in costume and all of that. So she's going to be relatively prepared as an average, like, B politician can be. I agree with Ryan. I think it's very difficult to see her have a total breakout performance, but you never know. It's one of those where we can't discount that. Also with Trump, we have no idea if he could get under her skin and rattle her. And that actually seems to be the strategy of both of the candidates. Kamala, the reason she wanted those mics unmuted is she really wanted to be able to get Trump to reveal himself as a chaotic candidate a la debate 1 against Joe Biden. Whereas Trump wants to get under her skin. Maybe he'll do the, she's not black thing, but more likely. We
can only hope.
Yeah, honestly, just for entertainment value. But more likely at this point, it's going to be a lot of flip-flop attacks, constantly charging that against Kamala and seeing if he can throw her off her game. And if he can reveal her to be that flip-flopper and the indecision, that confirms one of the worst things that people think about Kamala Harris.
Yes, and also, if the mics had not been muted, to your point about this perhaps being helpful to both candidates, Kamala Harris, I think, is somebody who could respond in ways that aren't helpful to her in a situation like that. And it's not to say it's easy, by the way. I mean, Hillary Clinton obviously was being, confronted with Trump's in all of his hilarity over and over again. But without the mics being on, I actually think, to the point Ryan was making, this could be a moment we look back 6 months from now, and we don't know it later tonight. We don't know this is definitively when Kamala Harris's campaign crashed. But I could see it being a thing where 6 months later you look on and you're like, this is the moment where it became clear to the American public that the Kamala Harris of 2019, the Kamala Harris that was literally less popular than Dick Cheney a few months ago, is still that Kamala Harris, even with all of the hype. Now, I mean, listen, the polls are so close. As Harry Enton has said on CNN, that if you correct for the polling bias in 16 and 20, you have a dead heat right now. Like, Kamala is up 1 in the RCP average, but if you correct for those, you're probably at a dead heat. So it's anybody's game. But I could see, because she's been on the sugar high, this being the moment where we look back and we say, that's where the air started being let out of the balloon.
I could see that.
I do think she could have a breakout performance, though. But what I mean is that it wouldn't lock the election for her. It wouldn't cinch it. Like nothing at this point, I think, can cinch it for her.
Yeah.
I kind of expect her to do pretty well. Like,
what's your bar for pretty well? Like, what does that mean?
So at least 2 performative, memorized zingers, like some riffs.
Yes.
Where she really lands them.
That
like
little girl.
That little girl.
Version for Trump, whatever that is.
20 million views each, going around on
Twitter.
Elon's platform.
Okay.
Will there be pre-printed T-shirts and mugs? So that's the question.
There are absolutely printed mugs.
There are.
And I will be buying them.
A couple of zingers back, and only, like, let's say 3 word salad kind of moments where you're like, what? What's going on there? Which will be helped by the fact that Trump will be spewing out word salad, weird segues from, like,
constantly
wind to, like, Hannibal Lecter to tax policy.
Right.
And it covers up
it's a question. That Trump shows up, though.
Well, that is an important point, though, because the last debate, the infamous debate in which Biden couldn't finish the Senate, is so painful and he ends up dropping out. Trump basically didn't get any scrutiny for understandable reasons, because Biden was just such a catastrophe. If you go back and listen to his answers, it's not like they were crisp, right? The last time Trump really had like a wow kind of a debate performance, it was 2016. That was a long time ago, especially when you're an old dude. So, there's a risk for him as well, that now, without the stunning contrast of Biden, whose decline has been so evident and is so undeniable, that people also see him with fresh eyes and are like, you know, he's kind of lost a step as well. So
I think that happened in 2020, by the way.
I do think I think that is true, especially with not so much with his performance, but he doesn't have his finger on the pulse of where people are the way that he really did in 2016. And that happens with any president. Like, you are literally in a bubble, you know, I guess literally figurative, whatever. Anyway, you're in a bubble, right? You're not talking to regular people. And he's a little adrift in this like online world. I get it.
He got kicked off Twitter.
He got kicked off Twitter, so he doesn't have
his
right. He doesn't have that, you know. And he, even though Elon, you know, he came back on, he doesn't really post there the way he used to.
He missed some important years.
Yeah.
He's not doing rallies. That's the other thing, is he's not doing nearly as many rallies. And that was an important way for him to workshop messages and get a sense of what works in a crowd and what doesn't. So I think the Harris strategy, even now with the mics being muted, is more to put the focus on him and remind people of what they don't like about him, some of his worst traits and qualities. You know, he sometimes really can't help himself. He reportedly has a lot of disdain and contempt for Kamala Harris and doesn't respect her or her intelligence at all. Like, does that come off? That could be very bad look for him.
That could be bad.
And with regard to Kamala Harris and, you know, what she needs to do tonight, the bar's pretty low for her, just in terms of the expectations. The risk is that, yeah, her new support is relatively soft, because some of the people who 2 months ago were like not impressed could go back to being not impressed. But the upside for her is quite significant, because you do have a lot of people who don't like Trump but aren't in her camp yet, who are telling pollsters, we want to know more. And so she does have an opening here to, you know, make a pitch, lean into the very popular policy pieces that she's laid out, hold up well enough against Trump to sort of prove that she's up to the job, and make up a little bit of ground in a way that ends up being sustainable.
I think that's fair. Why don't we put the Nate Silver latest forecast up on the screen, please? And if we take a look there, I mean, things quite literally in a dead heat in terms of the polling average. Now, you may think, wait, what you mean Kamala's up, right? Because they have it at 48.9 and then 46.6. But the problem is that the electoral college forecast is such that she needs to win significantly more by that to actually retain any chance of winning the electoral college. So the latest one that he just put out 4 hours ago has a 61% chance of Trump winning the electoral college probability and 38% chance there for Kamala. So Kamala's slightly higher than where Trump was going into 2016. If we look at the predicted popular vote share, Nate has it at 49.9 to Trump's 49. I mean, 0.9% increase there is just not going to cut it. Now, that said, as we continue to reiterate, each one of these swing states is so on a knife's edge and quite literally tied that electoral college probability, as we saw in 2016, can in a very real way go all Kamala or all the way against Trump. There is a possibility of a mix and match, which I find really interesting. Perhaps we can talk about tonight. You know, Nate now has North Carolina, Krystal, as the #2 tipping state behind Pennsylvania. Not a scenario we would have predicted 4 years ago.
North Carolina poll out, I think Quinnipiac, I want to say, that has her up by 3 points. And that, you know, that's a very favorable result for her. I think Joe Biden lost it by roughly a 1.5, so it's not like he was really far off. But since Obama won it, it's been one of those states that it just seems like Democrats can't quite, the demographics just don't quite work out. Georgia has ended up being a more favorable state for Democrats because they have a larger suburban population. And so that's been the state that's really shifted towards Democrats in this era. But, you know, since Kamala Harris came in, that has been the state where she has most significantly outperformed where Joe Biden was previously. So, you know, she's certainly opened up. Biden didn't have a map, right? They were on a hope and a prayer, like maybe we can hold on to some old white people in the industrial Midwest to make this thing work. And none of it made sense. They were hiding numbers from him. He didn't even know how bad things were, right? Kamala now has a number of different potential trajectories, but all of these states they are on a knife's edge. I mean, they are as close as they could possibly be.
Well, and you can think of in North Carolina, if you can really energize typical Democratic voters in a way that Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden didn't, the math is actually not that hard in the Electoral College to put together the Obama coalition in a place like, again, North Carolina. If you can energize typical Democratic voters, black voters in the cities, Raleigh area, if you can get them to come out for Kamala Harris, now that's a big if. That's a huge if. If you can do it, that's a huge advantage one really interesting thing. While we were looking at that 538 average, I went and I looked back to September 10th, 2016. It had Hillary Clinton at 42.1%, Trump at 38.8%. Gary Johnson was in the race. He was getting 8.7%, similar to where Kennedy was. So imagine, honestly.
Then that was
Kennedy
totally wrong, though.
Is a
right?
to-
Because-
Kennedy wasn't at any 8%
Yeah.
when he was dropping out.
Yeah, he was around 5.
Well, he had in the last month,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but Gary Johnson ended up getting a much smaller
Which is
portion of the
typical
vote,
with third parties.
and was going down by election day. But I think, and the other thing with Trump is that in these debates, he has had some really bad moments. And I know we're going to talk about that. Moments that the media feasted on, and sometimes for good reason. That back and forth with Chris Wallace, memorably, about stand back and stand by, Proud Boys.
That was, I think, very damaging to him ultimately.
Someone
I
was
think
making
was
that
damaging
case
to
to
him.
me.
Especially if you
yesterday.
tie it with Jan 6, that was really bad because
well-
that's what really fed into his 2022 where he wasn't necessarily on the ballot. But Stop the Steal took a beating at the polls in a way that almost nobody was able to predict and manifested as like genuine like suburban rage against a lot of that.
Yeah, but I do think in retrospect that moment, the Proud Boys stand back and stand by, was probably more damaging than I really gave
Totally.
it
I'm
credence
with you.
at the moment, because one of the things that we have seen since then is that this sense of extremism and chaos is, one of the biggest downsides of Trump. And then, of course, the other piece is abortion. And obviously, he hasn't really figured out. He's still really working through what he thinks about abortion, what his policy would be, what he wants to say about it on any given day. And that's certainly something. I know one of the people that's in like the spin room for Kamala Harris is a top president of a pro-choice outfit. So clearly they plan to really lean into those attacks.
I thought you were going to say the other surrogate that's spinning for Kamala.
Yeah, I was going to say, she about to say Scaramucci.
Scaramucci.
Known supporter of a woman's right to choose.
Listen, he's a good
Anthony
spin master.
Scaramucci.
What can you say?
Yeah.
What can you say? But no, I think as much as Trump is going to certainly paint her as a flip-flopper, et cetera, she's got this prime example of just within the past 2 weeks him being all over the map in terms of abortion and him clearly just being very uncomfortable talking about the issue.
Let's do some friendly wagers before we start.
Oh, boy.
So
Ryan's got to make things
people
interesting.
can play
How much
along.
action? Yeah.
Just bragging
All
rights.
right.
Okay.
All right. So
Ego on the line.
I'll give the over/under on the number of times Kamala says "I'm speaking." I'm setting it at 7.5.
7.5.
Do you want the over or the under?
I'd take the over.
I would take the under too.
I think
You're taking the over.
I'm taking the over.
By the way, Poly Market has stuff for literally all of this.
Because I
if we
think-
want to go take a
Here's
look.
my explanation for that. It's a cope for her not leaning on race and sex. So it's a way to sort of code in the direction of like Elizabeth Warren. Nevertheless, she persisted without explicitly saying, you're interrupting a woman.
She should say I'm persisting.
I think they're going to have a new. The problem for Kamala is really when she doesn't do the work and is unprepared. It seems like she has been working hard to be ready for this debate, and so I think they'll have a new verbal tick or mechanism or I'm speaking style thing. Not that it won't come out at all, but I'll take the under.
So we have, actually, Poly Market has live markets for all of these things. What will Kamala say at the debate? Abortion, 89%. People are saying yes.
Obviously.
She'll say the word?
Yeah.
Okay, 54% convicted felon. That's way too low. What are people doing? They're selling dollars here, saying there's only a 54% chance
That she'll say convicted felon?
convicted felon. I would put that at 100%.
I mean,
Who was
honestly,
betting
it'd be
against
political
Project
malpractice for her not to say it.
2025,
Yes.
liar.
Yeah, Project 2025 is 80%. Liar is 39%.
Who's betting against?
Do they have?
Oh, I'm speaking is only 20%,
Wow.
Ryan.
Oh,
So
I'm
there you
taking
go.
it. I'm taking
20% for one, just one.
Oh,
Yeah, there you
I'm gonna
go.
buy a bunch of those.
Yeah. There's some good odds for you.
Do they have one about whether or not Trump will question her race?
Here, let's see. I'm going to go over
DEI
to,
is on there, but
there's
under
a different
Kamala.
What do you
Trump.
think? You think he will?
I think there's a decent chance he questions her race.
They
Like
don't
that he
have
says
one. Tampon is at 27%.
Actually, I would take. I would.
You would take that.
He has actually said tampon Tim more than people I think would have expected. He's used it quite a
54%.
bit.
The highest one is abortion at 83%.
I mean, that's a
Trump's.
yeah.
But
Again, it'd be
Democrats
political
don't like to
malpractice
say the
to
word.
not.
Democrats
That's
don't
true.
like to say the word
That's
abortion.
true.
though.
Abortion.
True.
They
Because
talk about
reproductive freedom.
health
I
and-
like that.
So does Trump
So
now.
wait, are we just giving away free Poly Market advice? device? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, this is not.
By the way, we should put Polymarket's odds up there on the screen. Let's put this up there. What they have right now in terms of this is the third element.
There we go.
Yeah, 2024 election forecast currently 52% Trump and 46% Kamala. That's actually the biggest spread that Trump has had. And what's interesting to me is that Kamala is still much higher in the betting market odds than any of the forecasts that we've seen, let's say, lately from Nate Silver. Last time around, they actually tracked quite closely, but I think that's correct because 38%, I think intuitively to all of us, just seems way too low, considering how on a knife's edge things are. It's also fascinating that if you look at the betting markets, they are betting that the state of Pennsylvania there is going red. And again, that is not necessary. That Pennsylvania is going red, Georgia's going red, Arizona's going red. The only one that they have it genuinely 50-50 there is Nevada. I mean, all of those just seem wildly optimistic for Trump. Georgia especially, actually, if we look at what's been happening there. So, I mean, it's interesting to just consider the path to 270 for each of these. And, I mean, it does seem highly possible now currently, even though I don't necessarily believe it, that we could have some mix and match scenarios. That's something Krystal and I have been talking about a lot.
Personally, I think the Haitian American community in Florida is going to tip that state.
Oh, really? You think so?
No, I'm just
I was like,
joking,
I don't think so.
They have good reason to at this point.
There's a lot of Cubans that will outweigh their votes.
You know, I think it's worth, I was mentioning how Trump isn't as great, perhaps, as he once was. And one of the things that was making me think about
Krystal.
this, no, it isn't as, you know, hasn't had one of these great debate moments since 2016 and has lost his step, and it was kind of like, you know, hidden by the Joe Biden obvious decline. One of the things that's been making me think about that is the answer that he gave to a very basic question about childcare.
Yes.
When he was speaking to, who was the New York?
It was the New York Economic Club.
Economic Club.
A classic gathering of the ultra rich in New York City.
So he gets asked this really basic question, just like, what do you think about childcare? And the answer was such a mess. This is B1, guys. Let's go ahead and play this.
If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was somebody, we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country, because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars, and as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So we'll take care of it. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you read through the transcript of that, there is not a single coherent sentence.
Actually, reading it was more impactful to me because I
just love how he punctuates it by thanking everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
The best part
great
also,
question.
who's clapping? Like, who are you?
Kudlow.
Am I right? Is he saying he's going to take the tariff money and spend it on childcare?
Ryan, you're
Undetermined.
You're reading too much into it.
Yeah. So as a parent, that didn't reassure you about the childcare costs you're dealing with?
I guess to put myself into Trump's head. head. It's I feel comfortable talking about tariffs. I am in New York City. I am going to talk about tariffs. So no matter what, I'm just going to talk about it.
I'll just say tariffs.
I'll just say tariffs.
Ivanka, been very impactful.
Childcare, as it goes, is not very expensive relative to what we're
Well,
going
his
to.
best
When you
quote was
compare it to
childcare.
tariffs, it's nothing.
He was childcare. You gotta have it in this country.
Yeah, that was the only like coherent thought that he had on the matter. And I was like, okay.
You gotta have it in this country.
Yeah,
Even if you
look,
don't have
if he
children,
has
you gotta
if he
have
has
it.
moments like that against a highly scripted Kamala, not good. I mean, let's think about what that will look like in terms of the contrast, because the rules of this debate are going to benefit the more staid, calm, the collected, the quote-unquote presidential. That's something that Trump has relatively struggled at. He often rises to the occasion, or it will get rattled. And the other problem, though, is that he rambles. So in this case, if they allow him to just ramble through some answers like that, totally uninterrupted, and then Kamala gives an extremely basic poll-tested answer, that's not going to be, the best contrast that you want. Krystal and I were talking beforehand. We're like, do we think this is going to be boring? And I was like, yeah, I kind of do think it's going to be boring. Not necessarily to people like us, but if you're at home, it's 9 o'clock. You really want to stay up for 10:30 for this crap.
Yeah.
Like maybe just turn it off.
She's not
But
gonna die on stage.
statistically, the first 30 minutes are the ones that everybody watches. And last time around, part of why Biden was so screwed, it was like day answer number 1, done. Like it was we beat Medicare, and you're like, oh boy, here we go, total short circuit. It just never got better from there. But if Trump, has some of those ramblers, and then Kamala is highly scripted, I could see something like that actually hurt him.
Because she's risky. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Do you remember how Sarah Palin got through her debate?
Well,
yeah.
actually-
Totally
actually
memorizing
well.
everything.
So
Absolutely.
they were like,
Yes.
okay, it's either 60 or 90-minute debate. I
Right.
forget which one it was. They're like, okay, your opponent is going to talk for 40% of it. The moderators are going to talk for 20% of it.
Yeah.
You have to talk for 27 minutes or whatever. They figured out the number.
Yeah.
They're like, so they gave her 27 minutes worth.
And she crushed it.
Yeah.
She came in, and
Everyone
the
was shocked.
morons in the
Right.
press were like,
Yeah.
unbelievable. She
If you
spoke for
read
27
Game
minutes.
Change-
That's like the best.
If you read Game
comparison,
Changer,
though.
if you've ever seen the Game Change movie, which is on HBO, highly recommend it.
No, I don't recommend it.
No, it's a good movie.
Garbage.
It's a good
There's
movie.
nothing
I
true in the
enjoyed it.
movie.
Yeah, okay. But they have good scenes showing exactly that. They were like, oh, she doesn't know anything, but she's
Yeah.
a perfect, just script machine. So I mean,
Did you just recommend a movie that lionizes Nicole Wallace?
Okay, well,
Huge
fair enough.
Nicole Wallace.
And
actually, I
who
think
plays
her.
Is that Sarah Paulson? I love
It
Sarah
might
Paulson.
be.
Great actress. Anyway.
Sarah Palin, now
Yeah.
it's a total tangent, but
Right.
when she first launched and gave that first speech,
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit.
I was in the room for that. It was
Were you really?
totally
Brian
electric.
Electric.
Lipstick? You're there for the lipstick
And then
moment?
her
He was
RNC.
weeping.
Well, the one at the RNC. Sorry, I wasn't
okay.
the one.
Okay,
the one at the
her
RNC.
initial launch
Yeah.
speech
Yes.
was also like, oh, this woman
Yes.
has a lot of charisma,
Wasn't
and she
that
did.
at the RNC?
And then at the RNC, the speech just totally hit. So I mean, she's a former news anchor, right? I mean, she also is a performer, so it doesn't surprise me that she'd be able to script out. But I do think it's worth remembering that Kamala Harris. Ryan, I think you made this point that I'm now stealing, but she is at her worst when she does not prepare for obvious questions. And when she can take control of the situation, go through the things that she's prepared, she delivers it well. I mean, she does well on the stump. She did really well on that very first debate. That little girl was me. Like, I thought she won that debate.
Agreed.
Even though I, wasn't a fan at the time. I thought not only in that moment, but that moment hit, and she was really prepared and steady throughout the night. And so even though she wanted the mics to be on because she sort of wants to put the focus on Trump and remind people of some of his unfavorable qualities, the fact that it will be a little more rote and a little more controlled from her perspective, that allows her to occupy more of that role of the prosecutor where she's more comfortable.
And I think the reason that she'll be prepared is that she's running for president, and the men and women in suits are going to make sure she's prepared. Like when she was running for president in the Democratic nomination.
Yeah.
It was just her brother-in-law.
Who
Yeah.
cares? Like
Yeah.
the Democratic Party doesn't actually care
Right.
how she does. It's up to her, and she's like, you know what? We're clocking out.
Well-
I'm good. And then when she's vice president, same. She's got the JV staff. The White House doesn't really care.
They don't care.
It's
And
up
if
to-
anything, they want her to fail.
it's up to her to prepare.
Yeah.
She has to be motivated herself to want to get ready for that Lester Holt interview on the border or whatever. She's like, you know what? I'm punching out. Didn't do it. Now she's running for president. The entire party structure is like, no, we are carrying you over the finish line, and you are going to be ready for everything that comes.
Yeah, you have Ron Klain, you have the guy who's prepped every Democrat since 1992.
Yeah. We're not done.
She talked to Hillary. Yeah, she actually reportedly talked to Hillary Clinton on the phone.
She, I think, is more driven than she has been before.
That's true.
I think you can see it.
Absolutely true.
I think there's a really important point to make that on that point that actually gets to what you were saying as well, Saagar, about the muted mics being beneficial to both candidates, and that she's been running a very risk-averse campaign, right? They don't put out the policy agenda until a couple of days before the debate. They coast on the sugar high, you can interpret that as cynically as you want, but one very obvious, real strategic explanation for it is a smart one, which is that they didn't have to rock the boat because they knew that in interviews like with Dana Bash, things could go in different directions. Might as well just cling to the sugar high while you can. So the risk-averse campaign leads us to believe that she approaches this like a Sarah Palin. Like she actually, they're only allowed to have pen and pads, according to CBS, a report from CBS today. So that means you can't have scripted notes out in front of you. It means you had to spend a lot of time imbibing the lines and memorizing what you're going to say. So with a risk-averse campaign, I think what we will see is something more similar to the Sarah Palin approach. Very scripted version of Kamala Harris, not stepping in and taking big risks and challenging Trump if he does the thing where he walks behind her like he did with Hillary Clinton. Clinton did take some of those risks. She called him Donald. She was really confident in herself and her ability to go toe-to-toe with him.
For Jill Stein over Harris in the new CARE poll will cause enough panic amongst her team that will force her to break with Biden on foreign policy. Your thoughts?
I can't imagine what would force them to break on that issue. Yeah. It's like...
You saw the poll?
Yeah.
So there's a poll, just so people know, there's a poll out that shows Kamala losing to Jill Stein among Muslim Americans in, I think, 3 different swing states. So, and we're talking about Michigan. I think Arizona was another one, but obviously Michigan, there's a significant Muslim American population, so it's detrimental to her.
And they keep saying, gee, Biden is so unpopular. We have such a challenge, separating ourselves from him. We can't figure out how to do it. If only there was a policy of his that was in the low 20s.
Right, that we could really make a clear break from.
Approval of his handling of Israel-Palestine is below his handling of the border, below his handling of inflation.
Wow.
And they're like, there's just nothing we can do.
Right.
Except this same exact thing that he's doing.
Here's an interesting one. It says from Tyler ITP. By the way, we're taking these from our Breaking Points premium subscribers. You can become one, breakingpoints.com. Tyler JTP, on what policy question is Harris most likely to serve up a word salad? I mean, that one's easy for me. It's actually, I'll say, it's any one which is phrased in why did you used to believe X and now you believe Y.
Oh, see, I disagree, because she's ready for those.
No. Was she ready in that damn interview when she gave my values and changed?
I disagree with your assessment of that. It wasn't a word salad. She said the thing she wanted to say. Right. There's just not a really good answer.
I guess we talked about that.
It's different from a word salad, right? So I think that one she would be prepared for.
I'd say Israel.
I was thinking about more.
No, Israel.
She's locked in on that. She's locked in on that.
The Palestinians deserve dignity.
It has to be something that she isn't prepared for.
Ukraine?
Let's see what Trump does with Israel.
She's going to be on
Ukraine now. She's going to.
But she screwed Ukraine up.
Yeah, she knows what to do.
Remember the whole Russia is a country and Ukraine
that was
is
so
a smaller country.
bad.
That was
so bad.
Yeah, it has to be something that's a little bit out of.
Oh, you know what? That latest CNN thing. Did you guys see that? It was like 2019. ACLU made her sign some questionnaire where she affirmatively said.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
gender transitions for undocumented immigrants.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could see her screwing that up. It also just came out yesterday.
He brings that up.
Just came out yesterday. They had a cable news panel on it. I could see that.
You know, to be honest, again, I think I would think that her team would prepare her on those. I think it would be more something like, one of these bullshit questions they do, like say something nice about your opponent,
or
like,
you obviously borrow Hillary's.
What would you do on your
Donald,
first day?
You have a really great family. You know what I mean? I actually thought that was one of her best answers. I remember that from 2016. You're totally right, because she flubbed first 100 days, didn't she?
She
first that interview.
First day, that was the one that she was like.
So we can't obviously say it'll be that one this time around, but it would have to be.
It'd be funny if it was.
If they ask her about her core values, she's kind of fucked.
Oh yeah.
What do you most deeply believe?
What do you most deeply believe?
Word salad
She's
city.
Like,
it's coming.
What?
How do you?
I believe I should be president, obviously.
Like, why do you want to be president?
That'd be a great one.
Like that.
Yeah.
Which
You
is
could
such
see-
a basic question.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could see
But it's a
her
hard one.
word salading like her. It's basic, but it is difficult.
It's a hard one for
Yeah.
somebody, and for any. It's hard for any politician because they have wanted to be president
It's
before
egomaniacal.
they had rational, like, thinking capacity. Like
Right.
they were 6 years old and they were like, "I'm going to be president,"
Waiting for the school bus.
and they just never
'cause.
stopped wanting to be president.
Yeah.
They just filled in the blanks along the way.
Yeah,
right.
I could see that.
What else we got? Let's see.
No, this is the first
have it.
time.
First time?
I don't have a mic.
Maybe you'll have
This is
some-
actually the first time that we've done one of these night live streams where I haven't
I was gonna
had
say,
a drink. I'm surprised
I'm
Ryan
shocked
didn't
you
grab
don't
a
have it.
beer. I know. I like to do that, but
Oh, here's
no.
an important one. Will you guys be broadcasting during the debate from Caprice00? So here's the thing. Because of copyright, we're going to do the same thing that we did last time around. We'll put the Skycam up, and you can see our reaction shots while you watch it. ABC is going to be pretty litigious with the way this all goes. They're using this as an opportunity. Disney is to try and hype up Hulu and Disney Plus to
Well,
get
it went
people
well for
to go and
CNN
watch
last
it.
time.
I know. I hate to say
They
it. It
did
actually
really
worked
well.
for them.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, screwing us is very helpful. You know, like
why
making
they do
sure
it.
people can only watch it on their exclusive platforms is very, very impactful. So anyways, that's what we're going to do. We're going to the exact same time. And then the moment, so what, are we going to do commercial breaks? Did we decide that?
We don't know.
Okay.
Play it by ear.
we'll
we
see.
may jump in like
If we have
during
the
the
time.
commercial breaks if we have something pressing to say and
Right.
feel like it and we have time, we may do that. So
There
you
you
can
go.
look for that as well. But
Otherwise, we'll be live immediately after the debate, and we'll give you guys analysis like that.
here's another interesting question. Do you think Trump will make another shift in another economic or cultural issue? What do we think he'll say about abortion tonight?
I was
by the
going to
way?
say, because nobody knows it's
this-
coming
I think
until
the
he
standard
says
one-
something.
The standard one.
Yeah, even
is
he doesn't
Everybody
know.
wanted
Yeah.
Roe versus Wade to end.
Agree.
I'm pro IVF. We'll leave it to the states. That's what everybody always wanted. And now, and
And
you know,
will he veto?
And,
Like-
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I'm
that's a big
very.
question.
What does he say? He's like, I'm very pro the exceptions, rape,
Yeah.
incest, and
pro
the
the
life
exceptions.
of the mother.
But if he gets
that's about as
pressed
good as
on
he
if you
gets.
would
Leave that.
veto,
Right.
But
He'll
JD
get
said,
sort of a
JD
federal-
said he would.
Right.
Yeah.
JD said he
Yes.
would,
Yeah.
and Trump said he did not say that. Trump left it open.
Interesting.
So yeah, and
I think, Trump much more anti-abortion than J.D. Vance. No, I'm kidding.
apparently.
But
what
no, I
about-
think that's true because as soon as he starts riffing,
Yeah.
right, and that's the thing
Like
in
on
the
IVF,
debates,
when
he
he's like,
starts
we're going to
riffing.
pay for IVF. It's like everyone's going to get IVF.
Everyone will have health
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
That's a Trump
Oh, that was
rally
great.
classic.
Yeah, it was
So
great.
as soon as he starts riffing, he will just walk himself into these places that are sometimes good and sometimes bad.
Right.
Good sometimes because he does, at least maybe he used to more. Have
Yeah,
his
now
finger
we
on
all
the
have
pulse.
health care. So
Now
it
we all
worked
have
out
health care.
amazing.
He solved the problem. He's his own worst enemy. He
Yeah.
keeps solving problems.
and then there's nothing left for him to run on because all the problems are solved.
We've just had great leadership over the last decade. So Kamala Harris as well.
Interesting. What else have we got here? Do you think the assassination attempt will come out from Groucho Marx?
Yes, I think Trump will.
you think he'll
so?
bring it up?
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to talk about it all.
He said it- remember at the RNC,
Shall we
he
not
was like,
remember that?
"The
That
last
was the
I'll talk
last
about
time
it."
that he would ever speak about it because it's so painful.
Yeah.
And then he spent like 40 minutes of
Yeah, they
his
talked
time with
about it.
Elon
That's right.
going
Talking-
step by step through the whole thing.
He
again.
just
Talking
let
about his
Olivia
ear.
Nuzzi
I was
look
gonna
at
say,
his ear.
Okay,
I
but
just read the Olivia
what is
Nuzzi.
up with the fact that there is nothing wrong with that ear?
Because he's invincible. He's
Nothing.
Teflon.
There
He's-
is not. No
he's a
one has ever
superhero.
seen a more perfect ear than that ear.
He heals fast.
How is that
He's
possible?
healthier than me, and he's like a 7, 8 year
He
old
wore
man.
that giant
Yeah.
thing on his ear.
Oh, so I did read. So in the Olivia Nuzzi profile, they talk about the bandage. The bandage
Okay.
was Ronnie Jackson's idea, the guy who was the doctor and who's now the congressman. He's like, it's the only way that I could think to stop it from getting infected or something like. He's like, but it wasn't technically necessary. It was just one of those. So anyways,
really? It wasn't technically
That's what he
necessary?
said.
I'm so shocked.
That's what he said. But it was finally we got the explanation for the ear as to what it is.
I don't know.
wonder
I think the
how Kamala
resistance
would
libs
handle that.
have some good points about the ear.
How she would handle him
Yeah,
bringing up the assassination.
I wonder how she would handle a question on that.
I think it's
because you'd have to display like empathy.
I will
for-
say,
yeah.
David Muir is one of the only, if not the only, I mean, perhaps the only journalist in America that is still in the old school nightly news anchor model.
Yeah.
And I am not saying that to suggest that he is impeccable and
Right.
good and never errs. I am, though, saying he is a blank slate for most Americans. He sits in that desk and more than any other nightly news anchor delivers what people think is just like down the middle neutral news. He does that better than literally anybody in the media. So I can actually see him being good at pressing Kamala Harris tonight in a way that Dana Bash was not.
Okay.
You mean the hard-hitting question about whether she was making pancakes and bacon when Biden called her?
The
That's
picture
gonna
of
land
her,
for you.
The picture of her step niece or her
Yeah.
niece, her niece.
What? It's ridiculous.
He is an adorable child, though. you have
Oh
to
my
say.
gosh, so cute. But
Do you think this is another Groucho Marx? Didn't we already have one of those?
Groucho.
Yeah, he's
You
asking good
gotta stop
questions.
asking
What can I say?
questions.
No, keep asking. They're
No,
good
keep-
questions.
keep
Do you
asking.
think Kamala will call him weird? How will he respond? What do you
Ooh.
think, Ryan? You're on team weird is a good attack on them, right? I
That,
know
the fact
Ro
that,
was
the fact that they hate
skeptical
it
of
so much.
Yeah, it tells you everything you need to know,
that's,
right?
that's Roe's brand. He's like, he's reaching out to Republicans.
That's true.
And,
Yeah.
good for him.
Yeah.
well, but Roe was
just
making
as
a moral
tactic,
case more than a strategic case.
That's also his brand.
Just
though.
say bless his
Yeah.
heart, Ryan. Just
Yeah,
say.
bless his-
Anyway,
bless his
continue.
heart.
Yeah.
I love Roe. It clearly wounds them. Then the reason that I think is a good tactic is their reaction to it.
Right.
They just melt down at it.
And they keep repeating it.
He hates getting called all these names. Fascists. He talked on Lex Friedman's show about
Yes.
how he hates getting called a fascist, and that's why he calls her a communist.
Yeah, because no Republicans
definitely
ever
call
done
her a
that to a
communist.
Democrat
Comrade
before.
Kamala.
I don't think she will, just because I've never heard her say it yet. It's always been Tim Walz or it's been media. I also am not sure she's capable of delivering it in the way that it needs to be. It needs to come across natural. I mean, to be honest, do we think that Tim Walz planned that? I think it just came out in that interview.
So apparently, this
Yeah.
is something that he's kind of workshopped in Minnesota.
Okay, all right.
And got a big response to it in
From the
Minnesota.
crowd, all right.
So it became part of his go-to ways of discussing Trump. That and the whole don't you just want to be able to go to Thanksgiving and
Yes.
not have
Yeah.
these weird
Right.
political fights, which I do think is probably a very relatable sentiment for a lot of people out there. But I kind of agree with you, Saagar. I haven't really heard her say it. Didn't she say something like she called him unserious? or
Yeah, she
something
has
like
called him
that?
serious. That's right. That's right. I've seen that.
Doesn't hit the same.
I mean, to be honest, though, no, I mean, I'll defend. That was a good response. Remember whenever Dana asked her about the race attack and she said, same Trump, same level
old
of,
playbook.
same playbook, same unseriousness. Next
yeah.
question. That was her
great.
best moment, in my opinion.
Yes, because
from
she
that.
avoided
no doubt
taking
about
the
it.
because
you take no bait.
right
Yeah.
exactly.
No doubt
She's
about it.
not
Right.
going to be emphasizing race and sex tonight, and I bet Trump
Right, Ryan has been talking about this.
We'll have a
since the
hard
DNC.
time.
He's like, they're like, oh, she's black and a woman? What are you talking about? I didn't know that. Yeah,
I think-
we're not going to talk about that.
I think she needs to keep that roll your eyes above the fray
Exactly.
energy.
Yeah.
Which is it's sort of it's part and parcel with the dismissing them as weird, but without actually using the language, where it's just same old playbook. This is ridiculous. This is unserious. We're moving on to talk. Some of us are here because we want to talk about real issues facing
Biden had that.
Americans.
Remember the "Will you shut up, man"? Honestly, I thought it was one of his better.
It was a good
moments.
moment.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it was
no,
in
I
the
agree
middle
with
of all the constantly interrupting, and he was like, "Oh, the American people are really getting something out of this. Will you shut up, man?" I was like, it's not bad.
We actually have that moment.
Yeah, that's
I think
right,
it'd be
we
worth
have it.
playing it. This is A4, guys. I think the headline here is Trump
Yes, it
unhinged
is.
on Biden. So I think that's the one.
In our rundown.
Let's go ahead and play that side.
You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how
you gonna
strongly
pack
you
the
feel.
court?
Vote now.
gonna pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't wanna
you're a
answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the
You wanna
question
put a
is
lot of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justices,
the
radical
question-
left.
Will you
Who is
shut
your-
up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
right.
Gentlemen,
This is-
I think
This
we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's gonna pack the
unpresidential.
court.
That
We
is-
have
I'm not gonna give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? Keep yapping, man.
The people understand, Joe.
They sure do.
47 years, you've done nothing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought he came across well. I mean, you could see he was kind of half cooked in that in 2020, and he was still relatively fine. Here was an interesting question, actually, that kind of coincides with some of the analysis: is do we think that Kamala will throw Biden under the bus? That was the number one advice.
should.
No. That I agree. But do we think that will happen? So
No.
this was like the Jonathan. I'm not sure if you guys saw. Like Jonathan Chait wrote.
No.
Jonathan Chait, one of those classic liberals who the White House leads. But I mean, he wrote a whole column. He's like, Kamala needs to cut Biden loose. This is now like a Jeet here talking point, like the centrist, popularist Democrats. But I mean, I can't dismiss it. Clearly, those are the people that they consume. And the argument that they're making very clearly is like, you need to cut Biden loose completely because he is dragging you down. And what we learned from that New York Times poll that we covered on our last show is that that change candidate is the mantle that you need so badly. And right now, Trump is beating her 2-1 right now.
Independents say they want that.
I mean, I've been wanting them to cut Biden loose for years and years now, so I agree with that 100%.
But do you think, now
no,
they
do
may
I
have
think
woken
she'll
up
do
to
it? No, because I don't know. They make very perplexing decisions in terms of actually wanting to win. Like, for example, the fact that Kamala Harris is even the nominee, if we're being real.
Right.
Like,
yeah, fair. Yes.
If you think about the broad range of Democratic candidates that they could have potentially put at the top of the ticket, there was no reason they had to put Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. There was no reason they had to anoint her after, after Joe Biden drops out. But they did, knowing that there were probably 10 other Democrats at least who would be in better position to win this race. And with Joe Biden, the line they've adopted that they are absolutely not going to move off of is he is wonderful. He's basically Jesus Christ. Yeah. He's a hero. He stepped down for the good of the country, blah, blah, blah. His presidency has been absolutely perfect. We just, think it's for unstated reasons time for him to move on. She's not going to move off of that. I mean, Ryan makes the best point, which is there's an obvious place where she could create a lot of distance and it would be insanely... What,
symbolic too.
What percent of the country supports a ceasefire? It's like 75%. It's huge. And so even if you said, listen, we need to rethink our weapon shipments to Israel, even something like that, to create real space and distance from him on an issue where he is profoundly unpopular, of course, it's a no-brainer, and yet she's not going to do it.
She won't do it.
We know she's not going to do it.
I was thinking about it in the economic context, too. One of the big breaks she could make, because she supported, I believe, ending the filibuster when she was in the Senate. Yeah. I mean, coming out and saying, I would end the filibuster to pass minimum wage, my housing agenda.
Roe versus Wade.
Roe versus... imagine that. I would nuke the filibuster. I would go to war with Chuck Schumer, whoever it is. We would end the filibuster and I will pass it. That's my day one agenda. I mean, how insanely popular would that be? And I mean, is it really a break from Biden? You endorsed it in 2019 whenever you were running for president. You are ultimately the candidate. You're the person who would be in the job. So that's also where I see a lot of perplexing stuff, where she's inherited the same level of like cautious indifference that the Biden campaign had.
It's his campaign.
But it's a different person. It's like, what are we doing here? It does need to embody you at a certain point, or maybe it's not. And I'm just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think actually I'm really curious as to how she answers this question. I suspect we'll know pretty soon into the debate because there are degrees of separating yourself from Joe Biden. You could go full, pedal to the metal ceasefire, which she's obviously not going to do, or she could fully bear hug Joe Biden like she's done so far. I mean, when she's asked this question so far, she's been completely embracing Biden. Yeah. Love Joe, so grateful to Joe. But what she could do is say, listen, Joe and I, love the man. We have some disagreements.
Yes,
she could do that. I'm curious if she prepped that.
I served him loyally, but I'm running for president now, and there are some things that I would do different.
She won't probably do that.
Yeah,
I think that's probably too direct. Probably more likely, what she'll do is she'll just do a more perfunctory, like, I think Joe Biden is wonderful, amazing, blah blah blah. Yeah. And then pivot, and then pivot to which is emblematic of like what they did at the DNC, right? They gave Joe Biden his night. It was the first night. It was early on, so they could kind of move past the past and then just focus on her and not really talk about him whatsoever anymore. Another interesting question though is how much Trump will bring up Biden. Because he's had such a hard time letting Joe Biden go.
It's true.
And I don't think that I still don't think he's really coped with the fact that he is no longer running against Joe Biden. And so I think not only because he wants to, as a strategy, he wants to tie Kamala to Joe, but more often he just talks about Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's right.
Not even in the context of like tying them together. And I suspect he'll probably do that some tonight too.
She's in this funny situation where the places where she could distance herself from Biden, Ukraine and Israel-Palestine, the structures of
that's
the
where
Democratic
she's the most
Party
lockstep, actually.
They're not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
The other places where she would like to differentiate herself on the economy, like saying she's more business friendly, she would have to then, break with some of the great antitrust stuff. He's got the NLRB has been
Capital
great.
gains.
It's only
Yeah,
downside on that
I'd be
end.
interested to see. I would love
Lena
to see some
Khan.
good tax. I mean, I know everybody else at home would be bored, but I want to see some actual tax like numbers. It's like what numbers are we talking here? Capital gains. On her website, she has the classic Bidenism: nobody under 400,000. It's like, okay, but what about the individual income tax rate? Right?
She could whack them on housing.
She could whack them on housing.
yeah.
She has a housing provision. That's one of the areas that wasn't copy and pasted. I'm not sure if you guys saw that. There was that story today.
It was
The
New
source
Republic.
code, from the New Republic reveals that significant portions of the issues page was literally Control F
Just
over.
like how they left Biden's name in the platform.
Right, exactly. It's just like
It's the
from the
same
DNC.
thing.
It's the same level here. They literally copy and pasted some of that. But one of the genuinely new areas was the price gouging stuff, and it was housing. Very popular. Obviously, we cover it here all the damn time.
Yeah.
He can hit her on that with migrants, and he will.
Yeah,
He
On
will.
what?
That's true.
Like he'll say that like migrants and housing supplies.
That's true.
Totally tied
That's been
together.
a big JD Vance thing.
Yeah,
but
they've-
but I don't. I've never seen Trump say that before.
I haven't either.
I've only seen
but
JD
if she
make
brings
that
it up,
point.
I bet he will. Because he's.
No,
I don't know.
he'll
Lately,
say they're
he's more
he'll say
comfortable
they're
on the
cannibals and rapists.
Lately,
He's
in his
more comfortable
speeches,
on the border
he's
than
been
he is.
pivoting to the border on every question. Like in when he's getting interviews lately, when he gets into these moments where he's just like meandering, he almost has always pivoted to
Yeah,
the border.
but I think Ryan is right, and Saagar is right, that that's like almost like too intellectual of an argument for him to make.
Hence why
more,
JD is bad.
he's going to do his whole, like, they're emptying the insane asylums,
yes.
which seems to be him getting confused about the word asylum in the process, and the idea of, I'm serious, and the idea of opening up the insane asylums. I don't know where else he got it from. It seems like that's what's going on. So
The
he'll talk
asylum
about that.
process. Yeah.
Right, he'll talk about that.
Hey,
The insane asylums. And, he'll say they're taking black jobs or whatever. And that's what he says, So it's not going to be this high-minded, like, well, actually, if you look at the supply and demand
Well, no,
where
but
they cross and
but the black jobs
there was a
example-
study one time in Oklahoma City or whatever.
But that's a good point, though, because that's where he was asked a question, if I'm remembering that moment correctly, it did not have anything to do with immigration. But his immigration, he's using it as his Band-Aid answer on everything now. And there's some, arguments you can make intellectually
rewatch it.
about the downstream consequences, but he has just been, like, that is his go-to.
It makes sense because all
It's his
of
number one
anything
issue.
else that you could
100%.
even frame as being pro-working class has been, like, stripped out since 2016. So
Yeah, agree. That's the only...
He said also in the Lex Friedman interview, he said, I won because of the border.
so he thinks that that's
Wait, in
Trump in the he said I won 2016 because of the border.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, that is.
But he-
Yeah,
I think
but
it's
he really believed
absolute.
not any of the other populist stuff.
Well,
not any of the
He
Steve
thinks
Bannon,
that's it.
Look, I hate to
Right.
say it. There's some decent evidence for that, which we
Maybe.
talked about
Maybe true.
back in the day. I mean, look, I had to reconcile that. It's like Trump wins 10 million more votes in 2020 after he passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It's like, how does that happen? A lot of it is culture, most of it is immigration. I mean, especially 2016, if you look at the number one reason why people support it, and unfortunately in the Republican Party, if you look at some of the other crosstab polling, the people who are much more restrictive on immigration are not necessarily supportive of some of the other working class stuff. I mean, look, the working class stuff is still way more popular amongst Republican voters, let's say, than the mean Republican senator. But that does not mean that there's the crossover that I would love to see, right?
Right.
And in terms of what that is. It's also a prioritization. Border is just so high. Actually, I'm not sure if you guys saw this. There was an interesting George W. Bush opined today on populism. Did you see that
I did
quote?
see
Yes,
this.
incredible.
About bailouts.
The David Rubenstein
and,
book.
yeah, why don't you, here, you fill
So
time while I
have
look
it.
for it.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
I have it pulled up right here. So
here we go.
This is from David Rubenstein's new book. Ben Smith at Semaphore got a copy of it, and this is the quote from George W. Bush. I listened to Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke and spent your money to bail out the guys who created the instruments in the first place, which is an absolute political disaster. You wonder why populism is on the rise. It starts with taking taxpayers' money and giving it to the powerful.
Yeah.
It really irritated a lot of Americans, and they haven't gotten it over it yet. That's just part of it. There's a lot of other reasons why, but we've had candidates say, you're mad, I'm going to make you madder, as opposed to you're mad, and I have some solutions to make you less mad. We're kind of in the madder stage, where people are exploiting the anger as opposed to dealing with it like leaders should.
Yes, very insightful from W as always. Who's certainly.
I mean, I think that's kind of true.
So
He
I
wrote
think,
an analysis.
well,
Not wrong.
I think it's kind of true.
so I think it's half true.
Not
I
a
think-
great messenger, but
I think it is
it's true.
true for if you were to look at the majority of the American public. But what some center-left liberals were pointing out is that actually, if you look at the place where Republican voters feel the most betrayed, it's on immigration. Almost, if we go back to the 2010 Tea Party, how so many of those, like Eric Cantor, for example, was kicked out. A lot of the rage. Well, I mean,
I was running for Congress during the Tea Party wave, and obviously it didn't go very well for me. But
Krystal was out there yelling and saying.
I went to a lot of Tea Party meetings.
So do you think
because
it was
my policy was like, listen, if it's a group in the district, I will go and speak to you. I don't care whether your politics agree with mine or not. So I went to a lot of Tea Party meetings, and it was obsessive about the. It was that like small business owner, like I'm taxed too much and the deficit, and it was a lot of what it was. So to say that, I mean, I know immigration was part of the energy there, but that wasn't mostly what they were talking about in these meetings, I have to tell you. So I don't know. I think it's a lot more complex, and I also think Trump, he sort of workshopped it, you know, in his famous ride down the golden escalator. That line about, you know, they're not sending their best, criminals, rapists, et cetera, hit in a way that he didn't expect. He got a ton of publicity. I remember people were like canceling his show, and they
pulled his ties out of Macy's.
Yeah, but meanwhile he's getting this huge response, and so like many other right-wing leaders around the world, they realize like, oh, I can blame whatever you're going through. I can blame that problem on immigrants, and it keeps me from having to challenge corporate power. Like I can do the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and I can fearmonger about immigrants eating your freaking cats. Total racist lie, and it's going to work out for me. And sadly, you know, that has been very successful for him.
So Matt Stoller and some other people have looked at the way Trump even talks about immigration. It's not in the same way that he talked about it in 2016. He goes into these things about, you know, what's the best example? He doesn't talk about immigration as primarily an economic issue anymore. He talks about it
that's
mostly
my point. I don't think a huge I mean, I hate to say it. I wish it was not true. I've just read too much and seen too much political science that a lot of it is not connected. And I mean, look, at the same time, I'm an immigration restrictionist, and like I'll back it up. It doesn't have to be economic. Like you've had more people enter the country in the last 3 years than in the last decade before that. That's crazy. Like you can be concerned about that for a variety of reasons, and that is ultimately like Trump can't abandon it because that is the #1 concern for a huge swath of Republican voters. And at this point, enough. I mean, didn't we do the Vox chart where if you look at the support for restricting immigration on its face, it's the highest level ever.
Yeah, but you know when it was the lowest ever?
Yeah.
When Trump was in office.
Sure.
Because first of all, people were seeing the horrific results of the family separation policy, and second of all, because you had Democrats actually in opposition to that policy as opposed to now when they're not. When they have completely ceded the argument and are like, yes, we agree, immigrants are bad. Obviously, I don't agree with that. I think that the country is better because of him. I think the country would be better in every way if we had more immigrants. But yeah, it's no surprise to me that you have huge numbers now saying immigration should be more restrictive because both of the major parties agree with that point.
But there's a reality problem too, Krystal. I mean, having mass like tens of millions of people enter the country illegally or whatever, quasi-legally through the asylum process fundamentally changes the status quo in such a different way from under Trump. I mean, when you have so many more people enter in 3 years than in the prior decade, there is genuinely a different change in the way that people are going to experience that. I understand, by the way, the Haitian thing, like these people made themselves look like idiots claiming that they're eating cats. But, I mean, it's a town of what, 40,000, 60,000? And then there's 20,000 people there who weren't there before.
Who are there,
That's kind of crazy.
Who are there legally.
58,000.
Who
are there through asylum and fake TPS
if you talk
standards.
to the local factory owner, very glad to have these very hardworking
people. He's very happy to have cheap labor, as big business always.
Are you going to build a wall around an individual town and say that legal migrants can't move there?
I would never think that you would stand for the rich businessman of the town of Springfield, Ohio, and not the people who are getting replaced by the Haitians.
I'm standing for the hardworking migrants who were targeted and smeared in the most disgusting way I could possibly imagine, fueled by an oligarch who owns Twitter and the vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance.
After we spent 200 years destroying their country.
There are some,
indeed.
well, there's that. There are some decent people in the town of Springfield with very legitimate concerns that are being smeared as well right now.
That's right.
Too.
All right, well, we can't continue this. It's 9 p.m. So we gotta, I could go on this one for a long time. I've been thinking about it.
Well,
okay,
we've done that for a while.
He's all hopped up on geese.
That's right. I've been eating too much goose meat. All right. So 9 p.m. They say it's about 30 seconds out. So guys, we are going to be back here immediately after the debate. We're going to keep that sky shot on so you can watch our reactions. We didn't anticipate that being a big thing, but then last time around it was so consequential that we literally got the moment.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably my favorite photo of us ever taken, Krystal, of the two of us reacting live to the We Beat
It was so real.
Medicare.
Iconic.
Go ahead and
real.
tune in, and we will continue the AMA questions as well afterwards on the Breaking Point stream. So become a premium subscriber, breakingpoints.com. Yeah, let's go ahead and hit it, and let's all watch the debate. Hello, everybody. We just watched that major presidential debate. Emily, unfortunately, had to step away, but three of us will hold down the fort. I'll be extra loud, all right? Double of the analysis. I'm sure that's not a problem for me. But in general, certainly some major moments. We've got a couple of clips and other things that we can break down for everybody. We will be taking some questions throughout the stream from our premium subscribers, so make sure you sign up, breakingpoints.com, if you want to be able to take advantage. But before we get to that, and even to some of the clips, why don't we just give our general impressions? Krystal, what do you think?
She came in wanting to make this a referendum on Trump, and she succeeded.
Yes.
She basically called every shot in terms of what the topics, what the focus would be, what he would have to respond to. She maintained an affect of laughing in his face and rolling her eyes. He was pissed off and angry almost from the jump. And so, I think for her, this was about as good a performance as possible. She was well prepared and took it seriously and took him seriously.
Yes.
And I don't think that he took her seriously. And it showed. He took the bait on every, whether it was his rallies or his indictments or even the Central Park Five or his net worth that he inherited from his dad. He was chasing after every single ball that she was throwing.
Yeah, let me pick up on that because I think this is a really key point, and it's one where I can see amongst our right-wing audience, the ones that remain and others, is there's a tremendous amount of outrage about the moderators and about ABC. And I think we'll talk about this, about how the fact that these moderators did interject multiple times to quote-unquote fact-check Trump. Many of the questions were, frankly, ridiculous in my opinion. Like, Kamala, have you ever met with Putin? It was like, come on, what are we doing here? Okay,
Bless you.
Let's put that aside. Complaining about moderators is cope when your candidate also you had multiple opportunities where you took the bait, where you whiffed on the best answers, where Kamala, what I want to pick up on from what you said, was totally in control. Every single time it was her worst issue, she puts a little bit of bait in there that Trump is going to pick up on, and he runs with it. The border section was infuriating to me, watching and waiting. This is the part where Trump is leading against Harris as much as Harris is leading Trump on abortion. And I haven't even mentioned Trump's disastrous abortion performance.
Yeah, we got that coming too.
We will have that coming as well. But actually, that's a perfect example when I put them side by side. On the abortion one, Trump is all over the place, giving the worst answers humanly possible. All the stuff that she's tried to do previously, none of it has worked. He doesn't try and bait Kamala or move the direction. Kamala brings up a border. The very first border question, she starts talking about his rally size. Now we're litigating rallies during the damn border section, and then during every single other one, which was very good for very good for Trump. Any issue area, Kamala lays as much bait in there as possible, and Trump takes it and he takes it and he whiffs it. He validates every concern that she drops of he only cares about himself by litigating his rally size instead of talking about the border, and litigating his inheritance instead of talking about, well, I don't even remember what that section was.
I think that might have been about her flip-flopping.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're right. That's what it was. It was about fracking and flip-flopping. And I'm sitting here losing my mind, being like, dude, what are you doing? And so, in general, yes, were the moderators biased? Yeah, I think so. But, you're just going to come across as a whiny baby, only focusing on that. When you went into this, you voluntarily accepted, and honestly worse, even within that bad framework, they gave you a chance to shine where you could have if you wanted to. You've been in many biased debates before, and he screwed it. I mean, he absolutely whiffed it on every major issue that was best for him.
I want to get Ryan in, but real quick, what that reminded me of, remember the famous Newt Gingrich moment where John King asked him this question about, he had asked his wife for an open marriage while she had cancer. And, I mean, it was a horrible thing he did, right? Yeah. But they open up with this question. Right. And Newt Gingrich goes in on the moderators and turns it into a great moment. If you're Donald Trump, you come in knowing the moderators are probably going to be asking her easier questions, might be doing a little fact check. Trump at the top of his game not only handles that, but turns that into an asset.
Yeah, he's a deeply wounded man. For
that
him,
comes across.
For him not to be able to let anything slide,
nothing,
even with the presidency in his grasp.
Yes,
the depth of insecurity he must feel in whatever soul he has inside of him. to not just. Your point is exactly right. They're talking about her flip-flops.
Right.
They're talking about the border. It's a 90-minute debate. These are going to be the rounds where you have to score the most amount of points.
Right.
Absolutely.
They're all tilted in your favor.
You're just pummeling her in these rounds. Instead, they're not leaving my rally earlier.
Right.
They don't even go to her rallies.
Yeah, they actually get busted.
In fact, they're fake. Like he
What are
went
we
into the
doing?
fake thing.
Yes,
Like they're paying fake AI people to go to her rallies. And yeah, exactly. Then you're like, it's like, what are we even talking about now? I don't remember that it was actually
during the border
About a
section.
flip-flop
During the
question or
border
whatever.
section, they were litigating Donald Trump's cases. What? Excuse me?
Right, because she took the opening of him saying something about criminals
migrant crime. Yeah.
to be like, let me tell you about criminals.
yeah.
This guy right here. And of course, he goes, all in. And, same thing. The January 6th section was also disastrous for him because he gets asked the question.
Oh, my God.
He
said
gets
he was
asked,
joking when
he gets
said he
asked
lost
the
by a
question.
whisker.
Okay, you said for a long time that
Yeah.
you won by a landslide. In the past several weeks, you said, that you lost by a whisker and seemed to admit that you lost. No, I didn't admit that. I was being sarcastic. I won by a landslide. And then goes in, though the court cases, and they were biased, and there was so much evidence. I mean, again, spending time and energy relitigating one of the things people hate about you. No, I mean the other thing about the demeanor of the two of them, I think, was important as well because a lot of this is optics. And one of the things we said is she needs to maintain this sort of like, rolling her eyes, being above the fray, looking down her nose, making him small. And she did that. Her facial expressions were very relaxed. She was the one that was having fun at his expense. That's a real role reversal. If you think back to how much fun he had at Hillary Clinton's expense, how much fun he had at Lil Marco's expense, how much fun he had at low-energy Jeb Bush's expense. He was not having any fun up there tonight. And, that's one of his his ability to play to an audience, play to a crowd. That is his superpower, and that was wholly absent tonight.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And
Go ahead.
and that's hard to do, for her to kind of ridicule him without looking petty or like a jerk. Like there's a very fine line to walk there. And she didn't really come off as a jerk at all. Like she came off as like exactly like you said. Like she hit that well.
Yeah.
And for people who didn't follow the Lex Friedman interview or didn't listen to the Lex Friedman interview, he's one of these guys who is like, I love a lot of things about you, but I don't like January 6th. I don't like that you challenged the election. Why can't you just say that you lost? And clearly either he was ready to pander or his advisors were like, please, he's gonna ask you about this. Please just say you lost. And he finally says, I lost by a whisker.
Right.
And he was absolutely not being sarcastic.
Right.
Anybody
He was not.
No,
You're
he was not
absolutely
being
right.
sarcastic.
I listened to it. I listened to it multiple times because it genuinely is kind of a historic moment.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe this is a new strategy.
He's putting this behind him.
And then, I mean, this is the thing. And I'll say this too. JD just today did the all-in summit, and they asked him, would you have certified the election? He's like, no, I would have had an alternate state. I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, it's like, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to do 2 months before the election. Okay? Yeah. This is it. This is what we've decided to go with 2 months before the election. The number one reason why a lot of suburban people voted against you in 2022, right? Arguably one of the huge hits on him in that race in Ohio.
I can't really blame JD because I think a big part of the reason he got the vice presidential gig is because he had said that before.
Totally, Krystal.
And there's that's why he's in the slot. So he's like, this is my job to stick with this thing.
How about we just don't say it? How about we just talk about the border again? We're like, oh, that's an interesting thing. We should talk about the border.
And Trump could have told JD, look, I know you've said that and I got you on the ticket, but we're done with that. We're moving on.
And another thing is that he inexplicably disavows JD Vance, who gave him the greatest layup of all time. And JD said, yeah, he would veto a national abortion ban. So they asked him about it, like, hey, JD says you're going to veto a national abortion ban. And he's like, well, in fairness, we hadn't discussed it. Yeah, let's keep the door open to a 6% policy. What are we doing here? It's like every single level, the calculation, the Trump, the calibration was gone. It was the reactive Trump, the angry Trump. It was totally not in control. I can already guarantee you he's just going to complain about the moderators. I think there's a high likelihood that he does not participate in another debate after what happened here.
Would be another win for Kamala.
Which would be a massive win for Kamala, who has to memorize a bunch of scripted, baited answers, right? Gets the mods on her side.
Instead.
Boom, yeah, and now you just go rally for 2 more months, maybe do one more bullshit interview with Dana Bash, and you know that's it. So I just can't get over this.
And I would think some people also probably noticed, if they're voting on this abortion question, that his 2 points clash. Like he says, he really believes on a moral level it should be left to the states. But then he also won't say that he'd veto a national abortion ban.
Right.
That's not leaving it to the states.
Yes, that's right.
I don't even really understand why he is sticking on this.
Yeah.
Like, J.D. Vance is actually very, like, what he said in the past, he actually embraces
He's a
all the
right-wing
fringe
Catholic.
views on abortion.
If he
like,
can get
he
there,
is
why can't you?
right.
Exactly.
So J.D. Vance can be like, no, we're good. We're not going
Right.
to. And you can't. I genuinely don't understand that, especially because he clearly knows he's got a problem on abortion. He clearly, you know, as soon as Roe versus Wade was overturned, he knew it was going to be a problem. He was all over the place on this Florida amendment, and it was a mess. Since we're talking so much about abortion, we have a little bit of this exchange. So let's go ahead and play it. This is D3, guys, if we could play a little bit of this exchange on abortion.
Your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
He went on this long tangent too about student loan debt. I mean, I know what he's trying to say, which is like, okay, well, you claim you're going to codify Roe, but you're not going to have the votes to do it. It is an opportunity.
See, you actually got through that.
I couldn't figure out like.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah,
You're promising things and you won't be able to deliver them.
Right, and I mean, listen, I would love for Kamala in that moment to be like, that's why I'm going to get rid of the filibuster so that we can codify Roe versus Wade. But she in the section did the polar opposite of what Trump did, like in the border section, which is the stronger issue for him.
Yes.
She extended the conversation about abortion. She kept going in.
As long as we can.
She kept going in on it, going back to it, and then he would feel like, oh, I got to respond in some kind of a way. And she brought up visceral examples, and he kept saying, you know, oh, everybody wanted this to be done. And she said, no, those women who were bleeding out in parking lots, they did not want this. The majority of the country doesn't want. That's why in red state after red state, they chose freedom, she said, is how she framed it. And the other thing that I kept thinking about in this section, Brian, is the way that Biden handled the abortion answers in the last debate. Do you guys remember this?
Yes,
he finished by talking about immigrants raping people.
Yes,
right.
yes, he did. And now Trump is the one who's like, you know, bringing up his own worst issues. But yeah, and Biden gets asked the abortion question last time, and everyone's like, all right, well, this is the layup for him. And he starts talking incomprehensibly about an undocumented immigrant raping someone. You're like, what? What?
I got some fun
here?
breaking news here. Kamala's campaign will now ask for another debate, according to the Washington Post.
Okay.
Yeah, I would too. You know, I certainly would too. After whatever we all the hell just witnessed, I think we should talk then about what we've been alluding to is that there's this concept of like frame control, where Kamala was just totally in control of the frame constantly. So we're talking about the border. Oh, no. We're going to make a little thing about rallies that you're going to take. And then, oh, well, let's also talk about, you said migrant crime reminds me of crime because you're a criminal. And it's like and he's like, wait, no, I'm not a criminal. You know, and it's like, what are we doing? No, you're supposed to be. And actually, that's one of Trump's most powerful things is that he was always in setting control of the narrative. He was somebody who could pivot the discussion where he wanted it to go. So we have the perfect example here. Guys, let's go ahead and prepare D4. D4, this is exactly where Trump is talking about, Trump is asked a question about the border. Kamala is initially asked about the border. In her border answer, she gives a rally comment. We were all sitting here at the desk, and I was like, here we go. He's going to take the bait. And then immediately, that's what he does. He focuses on himself, not on the issue. So D4, let's take a listen.
And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk, not going to be embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back.
About Haitian migrants eating pets, and he's not talking about, I mean, that's the other thing. Why do we have to do with the pets? Laken Riley. We all know Laken Riley's name. You could say that. You could bring up any legitimate case of migrant crime, and you're not going to get interjected with the moderator saying, hey, actually, you know, we talked to the city manager or whatever of Springfield, and that they say that's not true. It's like he took the worst decision possible in every single moment there. But most importantly, Harris got under his skin and got him to whiff the answer on the border whenever, did he even say border czar? I'm trying to think. No, I believe the moderator.
I think one time he said it.
The moderator instead is this one saying, Kamala, you were put in charge of the border. Trump, it's like complete incoherence. If you're watching that and you're a normal person who's genuinely concerned about immigration or the border or whatever, what did you get out of that?
Yeah.
And that's the question you have to ask here.
Quick fact check. The immigrants are not eating cats. They're actually children who identify as cats.
Oh, no, okay. Transgender children criminals,
no, trans
whatever.
species.
Okay. See, that's the other
not
thing
actually a fact check
that came out in a couple of places censors. Because, like, we knew what the fuck he was talking about with the whole pet Haitian migrant thing because our brains are rotted and we're online way too much. There are millions upon millions of Americans at home who are like, what are you even talking about?
Yes.
In fact, someone very close to me who is like not that political and definitely not super online was like, if you're gonna make up some shit, at least make it believable. You know, like this is just preposterous and weird. Sorry.
Didn't it come from a Springfield town meeting?
It's not litigate.
Isn't it some like super far right-wing, ultra right-wing lunatic who like?
I can tell you the genesis. The genesis of it is that there was a Facebook post in the Springfield community or whatever in a group. On the group, it said, "I hear from my neighbor's daughter's friend." It was like my neighbor's daughter's friend says that the Haitians are eating cats. Or eating pets. That's one. Two is a viral video. A video goes viral of a black woman who was arrested for eating a cat. Okay, but it turns out that video did not take place in Springfield, Ohio. And she is an American citizen. She is not Haitian.
So it's actually the native-born people who are eating the cats.
Turns out, she's probably she's probably just a drug addict. But okay, let's put it that.
Yeah,
so
and
that's the genesis.
There was also a fake photo of a guy holding a goose.
Which happened in Columbus, Ohio.
And there was
not in
no
Springfield,
indication
Ohio.
that the man was an immigrant.
So that's
He's a member of the Kennedy family, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. You know, by the way, I think we should normalize eating geese. But anyway, that's a whole separate conversation. I think fish and game regs are way
comes
too.
on as pro goose eating.
I think we should. I mean, there's all these.
Extremely like greasy.
We're such a rich country. We got these tasty ducks sitting in these ponds for.
They're not that tasty.
I'll put it all aside.
Anyway, he's so internet-brained.
Yeah.
Not only then, right?
Yeah.
That he brings up this whole thing that most people even won't even know what you're talking about, let alone what Kamala Harris has to do with it, let alone that it even involves immigrants. Like, they just have no idea what you're talking about. And there were other instances of that as well, where it's like, when he, in the rally answer, in that same answer, he's talking about these conspiracies, she's bussing in people, et cetera, which again, normal people haven't heard of, they don't care about. It's just, I hadn't even heard that particular conspiracy. He refers to the January 6th rioters as J6, right? Which is also very online lingo.
That's subcultural lingo.
And, I do think that they're like a victim of their own success on Twitter. Like, it's too much of a right-wing echo chamber, and they're drinking too much of their own Kool-Aid. They're high on their own supply, and they think that this stuff is like legit, lands, has national purchase. And most people who are at all up for grabs in this election are just like, I literally don't even know what the fuck you're talking about right now.
And he has spent and I was sort of joking earlier when I said that getting kicked off of Twitter hurt his ability to be in touch with what's going on, but not really, because instead he was on Truth Social.
Right.
And that puts you in a subcultural genre where you start using words and talking to people who are just nowhere near the median. You're using words that they understand.
Right.
But anybody who's not in Truth Social doesn't.
Got some big news. I had to confirm it before I read it. Taylor Swift has endorsed Kamala Harris.
Oh,
just
there
happened.
you go.
All right,
Watch
so
that debate.
She
She's
just posted. She says, like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on the issues at hand. As a voter, I make sure to watch and read everything I can about their proposed. Recently, I was made aware of AI falsely endorsing Trump was posted to his site. It conjured up my fears around AI, blah, blah, blah. I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 election. I'm voting for Kamala because she fights for the rights and causes I believe. I think she's steady-handed, gifted leader. She also posted a picture with her cat.
Cat lady.
Cat lady. I mean, look, we all knew it was coming, but oh my God! With love and hope, Taylor Swift, childless cat lady. At the end.
You sure this is real?
Yeah,
this is
I
real?
swear to God.
Wow.
That's why I had to be 100%. I just went to her Instagram page. I refreshed it. I read it right off of it myself.
Well, this comes right on the heels of our cat conversation, so it's
Wow.
They're flip-flopping on how they feel about cats. They can't even keep their position straight on cats.
That is a big one. The Taylor thing actually is a big one. I mean, people have exaggerated it before. I mean, she's the most pop. She ascends, pop culture, the most famous person probably in the world.
She can get people to register.
I mean, yeah, but getting people to register to vote.
I don't know.
Look, you could be right, Krystal. I'm not discounting it, especially in a row your vote thing, this whole cat stuff. I mean, you've got tens of millions of people who are following her. She'll be on tour. I only know this because I'm trying to get tickets. Right before the election in the critical battleground states like Miami and Indianapolis. I'm just saying if she, does pepper some of that in there. But I do think, that is, it's significant in a certain way, not just the Taylor thing. The media conversation after this, relative to how it was after Biden, is night and day.
Oh, yeah.
You can imagine the backflips that they're doing on CNN and MSNBC.
Oh, yeah.
You can imagine the absolute coping Jesse Water tears over how bad the moderators were. You just don't want to be in that position. You want to be celebrating good stuff your candidate did, and they didn't have nearly enough moments for that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. No, that's it. I just want to know where Taylor Swift was at the DNC when I was promised a special guest, so we got Leanne Panetta. All right, that's what I want to know.
Nor did we get Beyonce. So it's like, come on, what are we doing here?
There was an interesting moment where, Ryan, beforehand, you asked us to take the over the under on Kamala doing her, I'm speaking.
Yes.
And we got a big surprise on that one, which is it was actually Trump.
Did it multiple times.
Did he?
Yes.
Multiple times?
One time he said, "Quiet, please." And
Trump
another
channeling
time,
his
he
inner
said,
girl boss.
I'm talking.
Perhaps this is a way for him to try to win the woman vote over by channeling his inner girl boss.
Yes.
We have D6 is a little bit of that Trump.
Yes.
I'm speaking, reprising
Very
Kamala's.
sassy. Very sassy.
Very
Trump.
sassy Trump reprising Kamala's famous line vis-a-vis Mike Pence. Let's take a listen to that.
She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Don't lie.
She went out in Minnesota.
You know, her face was very active too. That was
Yeah.
clearly very intentional.
Yes.
Her faces. There were times where she would actively go like.
It was a little Gretchen Whitmer for me.
It's like
at
she
times.
studied.
There were times
Yeah.
where she almost
Yeah.
like had a look of like pity on her face. She was laughing at him. It was night and day, obviously, with Joe Biden. But it was also very different affect from what Trump had in this debate, where he was just straight
Yes,
on,
he was staring
not
straight
looking
at
at her at all,
Right.
straight on, angry mug to the camera. And you know, I think it was I think a smart play in her regard. And like I said before, like they thought through how they wanted this debate to go. They thought through the spots they were going to pick. I guarantee they even practiced, okay, when he brings up criminal immigrants, you're going to say, you're the criminal, and then he's going to go in on that. When you get asked about flip-flop, apparently there was a plan to bring up like his dad's net worth or whatever it was that threw him off track there. He has become predictable enough
So much
that they knew what his points were going to be and how she could throw him off.
And they even telegraphed it in her opening remarks, where she said, you know, here's what you're gonna see today.
Yeah.
We have some of that.
You're gonna see a guy that talks about himself. We can roll that one.
Why don't we, guys?
That's
can we
really
play
setting up
D1,
the whole
please?
thing.
Because
That's right.
this is
That's a good
important.
point.
This was the set piece. She telegraphed what she was going to do. Then she did it, and he took the bait every time. Zero discipline. It was ridiculous. Let's take a listen to her, please, from the beginning of what she said she was going to do. D1.
But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook. A bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
So there you go. Like you said, Ryan, she set up. You know what that reminded me of in the moment and did rewatching it there? Remember when Chris Christie destroyed Marco Rubio?
Because he said, watch.
He said,
he said
that's right. He, has his memorized talking points, and then Marco Rubio goes on to recite his memorized talking points and use them over again. And then Christie's able to see he's doing the thing I told you he was going to do. And Kamala did that exact same thing with Trump. Like, here's what you're going to hear tonight. And then when he would do something like this, see, I told you this is what he was going to do.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So I was just telling you guys while that clip was playing, a reporter who's in the room, the spin room, asked Lindsey Graham, how did you think the debate went? He said the debate team should be fired and that Trump was unprepared. Quote, disaster. As you said, Krystal, it's never Trump's fault. This is like when, remember they were saying that about Biden? Jim Clyburn originally?
Yes.
His original cope, he's like, he wasn't well prepared. He was reciting facts.
They did a lot of throwing the staff under the bus. Remember? It was, they worked him too hard and they were having him memorize too many facts or whatever instead of just letting Joe be Joe. Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah, and we're going to watch that now. I mean, Trump is a capricious man. He's deeply sensitive. So what's going to happen? He is going to lash out at his staff. We're going to see multiple truths and others. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see, who was it? Susie Wiles and Chris Lasavita. Already there's major tension in the campaign between him and Corey Lewandowski.
Corey's going to use this.
Corey's going to use this against them. See, they screwed you, Mr. They're the ones who screwed you. And Laura Loomer was on the plane with Trump, right, today, on the way. Guarantee you she'll be like, you got to get rid of these people. So, look, when Trump...
She's the one that told him about the Haitian cat situation,
When Trump is in a bad spot, what happens is he always retreats to the most sycophantic, like the people who are the most willing. We saw this in
Used to be the
Stop the
evangelicals.
Steal. When I was covering him in the White House, I saw this all the time. Like when things got bad, it wasn't Jared and Ivanka, it was the Bannons, the Jenna Ellises, all these other people. So I predict something like
Mike
that.
Lindell.
Mike Lindell,
Yeah.
bingo, exactly.
I think this is a
the
really
overstock CEO, and that's only going to make things worse. Right? It's going to make things
Yes.
even worse as we get into the overall
I
stretch.
think this is a really good point because this takes us beyond the theater of the debate, and I think the theater itself doesn't really change the debate. It doesn't really change the race that much. Like it could have if Kamala completely face planted or if like Trump fell off the stage, but I don't see this moving the polls a whole lot in one way or another. But the way that it will substantively affect the race is exactly what you're talking about. The way that Trump reacts to it because he can't handle it. He was humiliated by a person he has contempt for, and you're right, he's going to take it out now on people like La Savita.
Yeah, people who are like professionals.
And the
And
people
it'll
in
bring
his
out the worst side of him.
Yes.
and he
It'll
will
bring out the
he'll
worst
retreat to the to the worst people around him, and those worst people around him will use this to their advantage.
Right.
And so there's only how many days left? There's not enough time for him to be
55 days
upending
left.
the race.
And some states are, starting to vote
next
now.
week.
North Carolina's out.
It's a
like
disaster.
now.
And North Carolina, as we were talking about in our pre-show, has the high chance of actually being the number 2, according to Nate Silver, tipping point state. So there's a lot of problems that happened for Trump tonight. I genuinely, look, everyone always said that Hillary won. The general consensus was Hillary won all 3 debates. She still lost the election. Okay, so
Trump
we'll
could
see.
still win.
He could. I think he'd probably still win.
I think
we'll
the
see.
consensus was also kind of wrong. Though.
Was it? No. I don't disagree with you. I'm saying the media conversation around it was that Trump had lost, quote unquote, all 3 debates.
Yeah.
So look, could he still win? Yeah.
Sure.
What will this have effect on the polls? I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think she'll get a bump?
Yeah.
You think like maybe 1, maybe 2?
I do think I do think she will get a bump. I think it will be certainly not as consequential as the Biden debate, obviously.
Yeah.
But we do have very unique circumstances here. People feel like they don't really know who Kamala Harris is. And this was her first really big test on a giant stage. And I think the ratings for this are going to be astronomical. I know, just from the normal people who aren't really political in my life that were texting me about it today and what I have a feeling the nation was tuning into this. And certainly they will be tuning into the clips that get, run and pulled from it for sure. And, she passed the test. She did more than pass the test. And the worst side of him was on display. So I do think that the polls will shift some. Do I think that it's going to be massive? No. Does it go back to, more like what it was going into the convention when she had a pretty clear lead, but, still very much on a nice side? I think that's probably where we're headed.
Yeah.
And then the question is, does that sustain? Is she able to sustain that? Because to Ryan's point, you don't have to sustain it for that long. We're down to the wire already. And Kamala says now she wants to do another debate. Do you guys think Trump is going to want to do this again?
I do not think it depends. So he has agreed to NBC and Fox. She has only agreed, I believe, to NBC. So is he going to agree to an NBC News debate? I have a high...
Maybe she
have a
quickly
difficult,
agree to Fox.
I'm not sure she would agree to Fox.
I don't think
just
she
because, look, when you came out of a good debate and then you just say, oh, I'm not going to, acquiesce to a sycophantic people, even though the moderators on this one were biased in favor of you, there'd be enough media cover that she could probably get away with it. I think it is a very legitimate question of if Trump participates in another debate. I'm not ready to say he won't, but just because his vanity generally gets the better of him and he always thinks he can take someone, and he's agreed. He agreed to debate Biden, but at this point, now he's got a debate which got Biden out of the race, which was objectively a disaster for Trump and the Trump campaign. And now he has another debate where he's going to 100% what's going to happen. He's going to blame the moderators and he's going to blame his staff. Does he have the wherewithal to accept another debate under those circumstances? I'm not 100% sure. He might have taken away both debates in this race so far were bad for me, so why would I do another one? But I actually think that helps Kamala as well. I think you're probably right. I think she probably got a little bit of a bump. I certainly don't think the election was won or lost or anything like that tonight, but I think it is very consequential in that he blew a moment where she rose to the place where she needed to be. She probably reassured a lot of voters about the who are you question. And then worse, every time she didn't want to reassure them about anything that she fake believes, she just laid up this very classic attack on Trump of he only cares about himself, and then he would validate those by taking the bait on all of these ridiculous areas. So on the issues front, he really failed to actually shine in the ways that I think he needed to. And I mean, that's objectively a disaster for his campaign.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten over Biden leaving the race yet.
Yeah, that was another.
Kept talking about Biden.
He's probably going to like fume about that for days.
Yeah.
On Truth, and maybe jump over to Twitter with that. And part of not accepting Kamala Harris as his opponent comes from, I think, him just not respecting her whatsoever, holding her in complete contempt. And when you hold your adversary in contempt, it only comes back to bite you.
That's right.
Should we take some questions?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, go ahead and pull up some questions. One last thought I had before we get to the questions is I think we also learned a lot about Kamala's political theory of the case and her approach in this debate. This was not a debate about here's my policy, here's how I'm going to deliver. It was an attempt to turn it into a referendum on Donald Trump.
She had one policy. $50,000 for startups.
Yeah, right. Which
not a bad policy.
There was also, I actually was at the bathroom. You guys told me about this, but Trump gets asked about healthcare, and what did he say? Like, I have some concepts and formation.
I have concepts of a plan. Yep. I have some concepts of a plan. Quote, but I'm not president.
Right. Okay. So, but it was, there was very little policy, and that was clearly by design. And they also started running this ad today, I think, where it was a reprisal of Obama's crowd size joke. And so that rally line was planned to coincide with the Obama rally size joke. And, so they're leaning into that as well. That was like their equivalent, I think, of that little girl was me moment that they had planned out in advance.
Got it. All right, so we have a question here. Just a reminder to everybody who is watching on YouTube or Rumble or anywhere else who's not watching on Locals, we're taking questions from our premium subscribers. If you do want to ask a question, become a premium subscriber, breakingpoints.com. So this first one is a great one from Jude1234. Was this worse for Trump than the Biden debate in 2020? Great question.
For the Biden debate in 2020, the very first
debate,
one.
the bad one. I have to think about it. I'm not sure. If I had to say, I think this one was probably worse, just because first time against Kamala, Biden is such a known quantity, so many more questions about Kamala and her abilities, you rising to her.
I think the stakes were higher in this debate, and that's why it matters more.
And the opportunity was so much greater. Like, there was so much damage he could have done because she's not known. There's only so much you can do to a 2020 Biden.
And those views of her are hardening very quickly. So every opportunity you miss to define her, throw her off balance, make her appear like, the word clouds that we got, that we're incompetent, make her appear like that caricature-ish, incompetent person that, has that image that has been spun up over these number of years. Every time you miss those opportunities, the clock is ticking down to Election Day, point by point. So, also that Biden debate, I believe it was probably a little earlier too. So there was also probably more time to recover from it. But they were also just both individuals whose images were largely hardened. So it was, the stakes were a bit lower.
It's actually later. It was September 29th. Crazy to think about, I know.
Wow.
Yeah, September 29th, 2020. All right, what else have we got here? They say, question. What were your thoughts on the foreign policy sections of the debate? Yeah, I think we can all guess. I mean, this lady, I'll let you guys handle Israel. On Ukraine, ridiculous. She basically implied that the only acceptable condition of victory in Ukraine is total Ukrainian victory. It's like, okay, we're going to be there until the goddamn end of the century then, if that's the plan. On Afghanistan, she is both defending the first time that a Democrat has defended Biden's withdrawal of Afghanistan. Cool. I think
let's give Rouhani props. Okay. He was out there on the Sunday show defending it at the time.
So she's like, well, it's good that we got out and now we're not paying for it. And I was like, oh, this is good. This is good. And then at the end, she's like, and he invited a terrorist to Camp David. I'm like, well, we were fighting a war against him. So that's probably probably how you should end a war. You want to negotiate at Camp David. There's a lot of bad people who've been at Camp David. That's how you get some shit to be over. It's just incoherent. So anyways, those were my general thoughts. I'll let you guys handle Israel.
There was,
Go ahead.
On Ukraine, I noticed a little, not to whine on behalf of Republicans, but there was a moment where David Muir is saying, do you want Ukraine to win this war?
Yes,
multiple times.
That's right.
And Trump says, I want the war to end.
Yeah.
Unusually anti-war for a presidential candidate,
Yeah.
like against the war.
By far, in my opinion, like his best answer, because he gave the same one to CNN, and the media freaked out about it then too. And he's obviously on the side of the American people who want to also end the war.
But then when he circled over to Kamala Harris for that question, he said, oh, I want to ask you about support for Ukraine, which is different than saying to ask you about support for Ukraine. That's different than saying, do you want Ukraine to win the war?
Right.
It's a much softer way of letting her into it, but then she still went in
The equivalent
extremely
question
hawkish.
would be, are you going to just continue this war forever?
What
Like,
are your
at what
conditions?
Point do
Yeah,
you,
at what point do you end
Is it important
aid?
to negotiate and end the war?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, listen, on the foreign policy. So first of all, I thought overall the foreign policy section was Trump's strongest section.
Yes.
I thought if the whole debate was that section, they were roughly at a draw. In terms of the substance, I mean, Kamala's Israel answer was exactly what Kamala's Israel answer has been. The question was actually kind of sympathetic to Palestinians. It was like, hey, there's been a lot of suffering. This many have died, and nothing has changed. What would you do different?
Nothing.
Lay up to, put some distance between yourself and this president and this horrifically, atrocious policy that is wildly unpopular. But we all knew she wasn't going to do that. We talked about it beforehand. She went through her whole, memorized, same thing she said at the convention, same thing she says every time she gets these answers. So that sucked. Obviously, Trump sucks on Israel. He's always, and his line is always the same, oh, this never would have happened.
Never would have happened.
Okay, well, it did. So what now, right? In terms of Ukraine, on the substance, obviously, the worst crime that we committed on Ukraine was scuttling, and now we have even more confirmation of the way we scuttled this early peace deal that could have avoided so much tragedy and loss, et cetera. And there's no indication that she has any desire to break from the Biden policy on Ukraine. I also would be remiss if I didn't say it's one of the areas where his policy is actually the most popular in terms of, when people ask how's he doing on this and that issue, this is one of the areas where he polls the best. So to separate my own feelings on the issue from, what I think, how it will be received, all her bluster about the Taliban and Afghanistan and what she said about Ukraine and standing with our allies, and that's why we have to turn a page on Donald Trump, and also baiting him there too. Remember about foreign leaders having contempt for him. She did that in that section as well, which he again took the bait and spent an inordinate amount of time talking about Viktor Orban for God knows what reason. But I think that the way she presented those things, even though I disagree with her in certain very key and important ways, I think it probably did land with the general audience.
The funny thing is, on the Orban point, it's like, we would be lucky if 15% of this country knew who Emmanuel Macron was, like the president of France. It's like to name check Viktor Orban.
This is it, but
like,
this is
again, I know who Viktor Orban is.
This is the online brain, because this is a leader that there's a fixation with in online right-wing subcultures.
It's crazy,
right? You drop a Truth Social about Viktor Orban, and
Viktor
everybody knows what you're talking about.
I'm like, yeah, grandma in Wisconsin definitely knows who Viktor Orban is, bro. Like, yeah, can people even name the prime minister of the UK? Probably not. Like, no way. That's like our closest ally, let alone the damn president of Hungary.
Oh, and maybe somebody in the comments can help us out here, because I have had no success finding out what the heck Kamala Harris was talking about with this thing where accusing Trump of giving chips to China.
What?
Like,
remember, early on, she said Trump sold us out by giving our chips to China to make their military better or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what.
There's got to be some.
I'm sure there's something.
If I had to guess, it's
he
something
even looked
about.
confused, like I don't know what you're talking about. But
it's also certainly not true, because the Trump administration banned Huawei. They had CFIUS that it put.
and they arrested like the vice president of Huawei, right?
Well, no, well, I think that was Canada. I'm pretty sure you're talking about.
Yeah.
Possibly with U.S. influence.
Yes.
Anyway, we don't need to get bogged down.
But she took the tack in that whole portion of trying to out-hawk
Yes,
Trump
that's
on
right.
China.
Right.
She even was like, "You sent a tweet about President Xi congratulating him." Oh, and she did the lab leak.
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
That was your favorite part.
Kamala's a lab leaker. She was like, she congratulated President Xi when he was covering up the origins of COVID. I'm like, whoa, what? It's
Wait,
like,
so
what?
Kamala, you know?
You won.
You know Kamala?
Okay, but wait. But, okay, Ryan, let's at least take that, bro. We won. It took us 4 years. We got the vice president of a Democratic administration to admit at least that there were quote-unquote questions around COVID.
The funniest way for her to finish her closing remarks would be like, oh, and by the way, Trump funded the Wuhan lab. Started COVID.
Oh, he would've lost
that is
his
true.
mind.
And then he covered it up.
Yeah,
He would've lost his
Fauci
mind.
and Trump. Fauci funded the Wuhan lab.
Just skip Fauci. Trump funded.
Yeah, Trump funded the Wuhan
Obama
lab.
had a moratorium.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And he lifted
Trump
it.
reversed
We got COVID.
the Obama
True.
moratorium on
True.
gaming.
He would have melted right there.
Oh my
He was
God!
such an-
Game over. Game set.
And every
match.
Democrat would be like, yes, that's exactly what
They
happened.
would.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely
They'd
right.
be in the spin room immediately afterwards,
Natural
like
origin,
Atari
I never-
sellers
yeah.
or whoever. They'd
I never
be all
believed in a
in.
natural origin.
Yeah.
No, no.
One last question, I think, from
amazing.
Tara Albaran. What was the single most determinative moment in the debate, and what do you anticipate the cope will be? The one that we played, where he responded on rallies. That was it. That was when it was solidified for me. I think that was roughly, 25, 30 minutes or so, and it was the first time of the border section. And I said, oh, that's it. He's lost. He lost it. He has no discipline. He let himself get riled up and angry, and from then on, I think it would just continue to be downhill, and he did it over and over and over again.
If people were watching from the sky cam, they could have
Yeah.
seen Saagar flopping around like a fish in a boat. Like, it was so
I was mad.
agitated.
You believe in things and you see them go to shit on national television, you're like, okay, all right, great.
I'm torn between that moment or that series of moments where she just, throws out the bait and he just chases after it like, whatever. But or the abortion exchange, because I do think
That's true. That was big too.
And this is, it was kind of Kamala-esque, frankly, because she normally is the one who gets a predictable question and screws it all up. There was nothing more predictable in this debate than that you were going to get asked about abortion.
Yes.
Like, you knew this question was coming. You know specifically you're going to get asked about a national abortion ban, which J.D. Vance had said you would veto. You knew this was coming, and you can't handle
around. It just made him look ridiculous.
Yeah.
And made him miss all the opportunities he has to score points where his policies are more popular.
Yeah.
Interesting. So apparently Trump himself actually just came into the
Spin room.
Of
course he did.
So that's actually that's generally a bad sign.
That's a sign he knows it went
Right.
bad. I also knew he realized towards the end it went bad because there was a moment when they were getting to the final questions where he starts trying to rattle off everything that he'd clearly, prepared, like fracking and Medicare fraud, but ending private insurance. It was like, oh, you realize the clock is ticking down.
Right.
All your
and
good stuff.
You're like, oh shit, I didn't
I
say
saw
what I was
that too
supposed
with
to say.
his
Like,
last statement. He was trying to just spray and pray all of it out there. And I was
That's
like,
exactly
It's
right.
been a long time. That's the other problem. I realized very early on is statistically the vast majority of people only watch for like 30 minutes. Like almost nobody watches this entire thing. You're very rare if you do. You watch the first 30, like get a sense of it, and you go to bed. Especially if you're on the East Coast. And that was when Trump really whiffed it. They had whiffed it on abortion, and then he whiffed it on immigration. Back to back, the two most consequential issues of this entire election. So that was my takeaway. And knowing him too, the fact that he's in that spin room, he is there because he probably immediately turned on the television afterwards, saw the coverage, and he goes, I need to go out there and I need to reclaim it.
He's trying to change the narrative.
So far, I haven't seen
Thinks he can
anything
spin
that
it
he
back.
said.
It's. I mean, those days are kind of over. It's. I think the spin room used to be a lot more consequential than it is at this point. But to your point about his closing statement, the message there is very effective. It's like, okay, you got all these great ideas. Where were they for 3.5 years? How does it take you to the very end of the debate before that ever comes out of your mouth?
Totally.
Because that should have been what he could have hit her on that over and over again. And that's how you get a message to actually sink in. You can't just say it once at the end of the debate. That could have been a refrain, no matter what she was talking about, on Ukraine, on healthcare, on energy, whatever it was, he could have been saying that, and it doesn't come out till the very end when he realizes, like, oh shit, I got to do something to try to turn this around and put lipstick on this pig.
Yeah, that's right. All right, any closing thoughts, Ryan? What do you think?
I think Trump going out to the spin room is great evidence of the point that you were making earlier, that he's going to unravel for a week or two, but so much more could still happen. Like maybe there's a breakthrough in Ukraine or something, like a collapse over there, or like the election is still wide open.
Yes,
that's the point.
Yeah, that's absolutely. What do you think is going to happen with the polls with regard to this debate, if anything?
I think she probably does get a little tiny bump from people leaving Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, like a couple of people are like,
You know, one
and
thing,
also
I think she's going to raise she's going to
fuck so much money.
Yes.
Like $100 million, like in a week or something crazy.
She just has to make people not hate her.
Yeah.
And she did fine.
Right.
In that, if that's the goal in that debate.
And be an acceptable alternative, and people be able to envision you in the role and like rise the occasional.
Still no idea what she stands for.
Still no idea what she stands for.
Krystal, any last thoughts?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we've covered it all.
Yeah.
Not a good night for Trump. Not determinative, right? I think she did herself a lot of favors. And the question has been, can she like vibe and meme her way into November? And every day that goes by, we're closer to her being able to pull that off, because she's going to get a phenomenal news cycle out of this.
Right.
She's going to get a phenomenal news cycle. The clips are going to be circulating. He's going to be fuming and doing himself no favors. There's going to be all kinds of like leaks out of his campaign, this one throwing this one under the bus and all that stuff. And, you know, so I think she's the strategy of running out the clock and vibing and memeing till November is kind of working out pretty
Certainly
well
could
right
work. Also, now Taylor Swift has weighed in. So, yeah, my general one is just what a missed opportunity. And it just shows you that the Trump, the chaotic Trump, the one that everybody said shouldn't appear, he just can't help himself sometimes. And if you're such an easy mark for Kamala, who's not, let's be honest, like we're not looking at the most talented politician in modern American history, I think a lot of people are going to read into that.
Yeah.
And you certainly, at the very least, you really did not give yourself the opportunity to be that change candidate that people wanted you to be from those undecided voters we saw in the New York Times. You give Kamala an equal shot at that, and that very much that ethos through the election going up, it could be what costs you at the end of the day. When we're this tight, everything matters, and the stakes were crazy.
There was his greatest asset is like his charm and his levity, and when he makes people laugh when they don't even want to laugh, and there was none of that side of him tonight. So yeah, be interesting to see what he's saying in the spin room.
All right, we will have comprehensive coverage continuing here on Breaking Points, so we will see you all later.